The first ships appeared at the edge of the system without ceremony, without announcement, and without resistance. To them, it was just another expansion. Another quiet claiming of a weak world that had not yet learned its place. Their fleet stretched across the dark like a controlled storm, massive hulls layered in overlapping shields, weapons designed to crack continents waiting in silence. Every calculation predicted the same outcome: swift compliance or complete erasure. From the command vessel, the invasion was already considered decided. The species below had been observed for decades through distant scans and intercepted signals. Fragmented governance, conflicting ideologies, inefficient communication systems. A civilization still arguing with itself while standing on the edge of interstellar exposure. They had no unified defense grid, no fleet stationed beyond their own planet, no sign of coordinated military readiness. Primitive, by every measurable standard. The commander watched the rotating sphere of Earth fill the forward display. Blue oceans, scattered lights across continents, a fragile atmosphere hugging its surface. Beautiful in a simple way. Vulnerable in every way that mattered. There was no urgency in his posture, no anticipation. Only confirmation. This would be routine. Begin presence declaration, he ordered, more out of protocol than necessity. Before the fleet could transmit, a signal reached them first. It was not scrambled. Not encrypted. Not disguised. A direct broadcast, clear across all frequencies, as if it had been waiting for them. The translation systems processed it instantly. You are entering sovereign space. Turn back now. This is your only warning. Silence followed. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of confusion, but something else entirely. The tone carried no tremor, no hesitation. It was calm, level, almost indifferent. That alone was enough to draw attention. Several officers exchanged glances, subtle shifts betraying their uncertainty. The commander did not react at first. He let the message replay once, then again, studying not the words, but the delivery. A warning, issued by a species that lacked the means to enforce it. Primitive posturing, one of the strategists said, breaking the quiet. They attempt to establish psychological leverage. Another voice added. They likely assume we are unaware of their limitations. A bluff to delay engagement. The commander inclined his head slightly, considering. Bluffing required desperation. Desperation had a signature: erratic signals, defensive mobilization, frantic coordination. None of that was present. Their sensors showed a planet continuing its usual activity. Communications flowed normally across continents. Civilian transmissions dominated the spectrum. There was no surge in military frequencies, no indication of a last stand forming. They are unaware of their position, the commander concluded. They believe a warning has weight. The fleet maintained its advance. No countermeasure followed. No defensive perimeter activated. No visible response at all. The distance between the invaders and the planet closed steadily, measured in precise increments. Still nothing changed below. No panic. No escalation. Just normalcy. That, more than the message, lingered. Continue approach, the commander said. Prepare compliance directives. Orders moved through the fleet like a ripple. Weapon systems aligned. Targeting matrices updated with surface coordinates. Cities were mapped, infrastructure catalogued, resistance points predicted before they even existed. It was a familiar pattern, executed countless times before. Yet the signal remained open, looping quietly in the background. You are entering sovereign space. Turn back now. This is your only warning. There was no follow-up. No reinforcement of the threat. No attempt to negotiate or plead. It simply ended. One warning. Nothing more. A junior officer hesitated before speaking. Commander, should we issue a response? The question hung for a moment. No, he replied. They will understand soon enough. The fleet crossed the threshold into the inner system. Planets shifted in their orbits beneath calculated trajectories. The star burned steadily behind them, indifferent to what was about to unfold. Every variable remained within expectation. Except one. They have not repeated the transmission, another officer noted. The commander's gaze remained fixed on the planet. They said it once. That implies they believe it was sufficient. A faint ripple of amusement moved through the command deck. Confidence without capability. It was a common trait among emerging species. They mistook survival for strength, persistence for power. They had not yet encountered something that could end them without effort. That was about to change. Final approach vector locked. Navigation reported. The commander gave a single nod. Below them, Earth continued as it always had, unaware, or unconcerned, by the force descending toward it. And in the silence that followed their ignored warning, humanity did nothing at all. The fleet advanced deeper into the system with absolute confidence, their formation tightening as they moved past the outer planets. Every projection still pointed toward a clean acquisition. No resistance had appeared, no defensive perimeter had formed, and no attempt at evacuation had been detected. The silence from the planet below was interpreted as submission long before any formal declaration could be made. Sensor arrays swept continuously across Earth and its surrounding space. Civilian transmissions dominated the spectrum, routine communications, entertainment signals, fragmented languages overlapping without order. Nothing about it resembled a species preparing for extinction. If anything, the lack of urgency reinforced the assumption that they did not fully comprehend what approached them. They continue as if nothing has changed, one officer noted, studying the data streams. No global coordination. No escalation in military output. The commander remained still, observing. They are incapable of it. That conclusion settled easily among the crew. A divided species could not respond as one. Even if they attempted resistance, it would come in isolated, ineffective fragments. The fleet had erased more advanced civilizations that had stood united. This would be no different. And yet, as they moved closer, something subtle began to shift. It started with a minor fluctuation in one of the outer vessels. A brief systems interruption. Navigation flickered for less than a second before stabilizing. It was logged and dismissed. Minor anomalies occurred during long-range operations. Nothing unusual. Then another ship reported a similar disturbance. Not identical, but close enough to be noted. Sensor drift. A momentary delay in response time. Again, it corrected itself before intervention was required. Check synchronization across the fleet, the commander ordered. Already in progress, came the reply. No external interference detected. That answer should have been sufficient. Their systems were shielded against intrusion, layered with redundancies designed to prevent exactly this kind of disruption. There was no known technology within this system capable of breaching them. The fleet continued forward. Minutes later, a probe vessel deployed toward Earth's orbital range transmitted incomplete data before its signal cut entirely. No explosion. No distress call. The connection simply ceased, as if the probe had never existed. Re-establish link, the commander said. Attempts were immediate and thorough. Backup channels opened. Secondary relays activated. Nothing returned. Signal loss confirmed. An officer reported. No debris field detected. That drew attention. Possible malfunction? Another suggested. Unlikely, came the response. Systems were fully operational prior to loss. The commander considered the possibilities. A mechanical failure without trace was improbable. External interference without detection was not possible. And yet the probe was gone. Before further analysis could be completed, the transmission channel activated again. The same frequency. The same clarity. You were advised to leave. The tone had changed. Still calm, still controlled, but colder now. Less neutral. There was no urgency in it, no escalation, just a quiet reinforcement of something already stated. It carried the weight of finality, not negotiation. A subtle tension moved across the command deck. They repeat their warning, one officer said. After the probe incident. The implication settled without being spoken. The commander's gaze hardened slightly. Coincidence. Nothing more. Even as he said it, additional reports began to surface. Another vessel experienced a systems delay, this time affecting internal communications. Crew members reported brief desynchronization between command inputs and system responses. It lasted only seconds, but it was enough to register. "Run full diagnostics," the commander ordered. "All systems are within expected parameters," came the reply. "No anomalies detected." That answer was no longer reassuring. Across the fleet, similar disturbances appeared. Minor. Inconsistent. Impossible to predict. One ship's targeting array recalibrated itself without command input. Another's internal sensors produced overlapping readings before correcting. None of it caused damage. None of it impaired function long enough to be classified as a threat. But it was spreading. "What are we looking at?" the commander demanded. "We don't know," an officer admitted. "There is no detectable source." That was the first unacceptable answer. The fleet had encountered unknown technologies before, but never without some form of traceable origin. Every action had a source. Every disruption had a cause. Here, there was nothing. No signal. No emission. No visible force acting against them. Only results. Another alert triggered. A second probe vessel, deployed under enhanced monitoring, vanished mid-transmission. Its data stream fragmented into incoherent patterns before cutting entirely. Again, no explosion. No debris. No evidence. Silence. The commander no longer dismissed it. "Full alert status," he ordered. "Increase sensor resolution. I want everything." Across the fleet, systems adjusted. Scans intensified. Analysis routines expanded, searching for anything that could explain what was happening. They found nothing. And still, the planet below remained unchanged. No fleets launched to meet them. No weapons fired. No visible defense activated. Humanity continued its existence as if the most advanced invasion force in known space was not descending toward it. That calm, once interpreted as ignorance, began to feel different. Not passive. Deliberate. The commander watched Earth in silence, the earlier confidence beginning to fracture at its edges. Something was happening, something beyond their understanding, and it was happening without effort, without presence, without warning. And for the first time since entering the system, the thought formed, uninvited and unwelcome. They were not being ignored. They were being handled. The disturbances stopped being minor. They became intentional. Across the fleet, systems no longer flickered and recovered, they shifted, responded, and behaved in ways no command had initiated. Targeting arrays recalculated without authorization. Internal diagnostics returned perfect results, while visible malfunctions continued. Commands were executed before they were given, or not at all. The illusion of control began to fracture. "Lock weapons on the planet," the commander ordered, his tone sharpened by the growing inconsistency. Acknowledgments came instantly, but the results did not follow. Targeting systems aligned, then drifted. Firing solutions appeared valid, then invalid, cycling faster than any manual correction could compensate for. "Stabilize targeting," he snapped. "We are attempting to," an officer replied, tension bleeding into his voice. "The system is adjusting itself." That was not possible. Their systems did not adjust without input. They executed commands with precision. There was no interpretation, no autonomy beyond defined parameters. Yet the data showed otherwise. Another report cut through. "Fighter deployment unsuccessful. Launch sequence initiated, then aborted without command. Override it." "We did." "It initiated again, then shut down mid-cycle." A pattern was forming, but it was not mechanical. It was not random failure. It was responsive, adaptive, almost aware. "External interference confirmed?" the commander demanded. "No detectable source," came the answer again. The same unacceptable conclusion. Then the fleet's internal communication channels began to distort. Messages overlapped, fragmented, rerouted to unintended recipients. Orders arrived altered, incomplete, or duplicated with conflicting instructions. Crews began acting on incorrect data, correcting themselves seconds later, only for the cycle to repeat. Confusion spread. "Re-establish command hierarchy," the commander ordered. "We are trying," the communications officer replied. "Signals are being redirected." "By what?" No answer came. Then the transmission returned. "This is not your battlefield. You were given a chance to leave." The voice remained calm, unchanged in tone, but now it carried something undeniable. Not a warning. Not a threat. A statement of fact. The commander felt the shift fully now. This was not a species reacting to invasion. This was a species executing a response already prepared. "Prepare full offensive strike," he ordered, forcing control back into his voice. "All ships. Simultaneous fire." If the source of interference could not be identified, it would be eliminated with everything else. Across the fleet, weapon systems primed. Energy built within firing chambers, stabilizers locking into position. For a brief moment, everything aligned. Then the first ship fired. Not at Earth. At another vessel within the formation. The blast struck with full force, shields collapsing under unexpected impact. The targeted ship attempted to respond, interpreting the strike as hostile action. It returned fire automatically, its systems following corrupted data that identified an ally as an enemy. "Cease fire!" the commander barked. No response. More weapons discharged, some toward the planet, others toward nearby ships. Chaos erupted in precise, calculated bursts, each action triggered by systems that believed they were operating correctly. "We've lost targeting integrity," an officer reported. "Systems are feeding false identifiers." "Shut them down!" "We can't. Commands are not registering consistently." The fleet, once a unified force, began to fracture under its own fire. Not through panic, not through error, but through manipulation so complete that reality itself had become unreliable. Then, in the midst of it, something appeared. A single vessel. It did not emerge with speed or force. It was simply there, within the formation, occupying space that had been empty moments before. Small compared to the massive warships surrounding it. Unarmed by every visible metric. No active weapons. No shield signatures comparable to theirs. It did nothing. No attack. No movement. No signal. And yet, every system across the fleet reacted to its presence. Weapon failures increased. Communication breakdowns intensified. Navigation systems looped coordinates, preventing repositioning. Attempts to target the new arrival failed entirely, as if the ship could not be recognized as an object. "What is that?" someone whispered. No one answered. The commander stared at it, something cold settling beneath his control. The realization came not as a sudden revelation, but as a gradual, undeniable truth. They had been engaged from the moment they entered the system. Not with force. With understanding. Every system they relied on, every layer of control, every safeguard, they were not being attacked. They were being rewritten. The small vessel remained still, unaffected by the chaos surrounding it. Untouched. Unreachable. The commander exhaled slowly, the last remnants of certainty dissolving. "We are not fighting them," he said quietly. No one spoke. Because the truth had already taken hold. They were no longer capable of fighting anything at all. Control did not slip away all at once. It was removed piece by piece, cleanly, precisely, until nothing remained but the illusion that it had ever been theirs. Navigation was the first to collapse entirely. Coordinates fed into the system returned valid confirmations, yet the ships did not move as commanded. Engines responded, power surged, but vectors looped back on themselves. Attempts to retreat resulted in circular paths that brought vessels back to their original positions without explanation. Distance calculations became meaningless. Space itself felt contained. "Plot a manual exit trajectory," the commander ordered. "We have," the navigation officer replied, voice tight. "The system acknowledges it. The ship does not follow it. Override the system." "We are not being denied," the officer said. "It's accepting every command." That was worse. Around them, other ships reported identical failures. The fleet, once advancing with unstoppable momentum, was now suspended in a controlled cage they could not perceive, only experience. Movement existed in theory, not in reality. Then communication fractured beyond recovery. Signals no longer reached their intended destinations. Commands from the command vessel arrived altered, sometimes inverted, sometimes delayed until irrelevant. Entire sections of the fleet operated on conflicting directives, unaware of the distortion. Attempts to isolate channels failed. Attempts to shut them down failed. Every system remained active, responsive, and entirely untrustworthy. Panic, once distant, began to take form. Crew members questioned their instruments, then their orders, then each other. Reports contradicted themselves within seconds. Confirmation became impossible. Trust dissolved. "Reinforce command structure," the commander demanded. "There is no stable channel left," came the strained reply. "We cannot guarantee any message is accurate." The commander felt it then, the shift from uncertainty to inevitability. This was no longer interference. This was control so complete it required no force. Life support systems fluctuated next. Not enough to cause immediate harm, but enough to be noticed. Oxygen levels dipped briefly before stabilizing. Temperature controls adjusted without command, then returned to normal. It was subtle, deliberate, a reminder that even the most basic functions were no longer secure. "They are inside our systems," an officer said, the realization breaking through. "Every layer." The commander did not respond immediately. He was watching the data streams, the endless flow of information that now meant nothing. Every safeguard had been designed to prevent intrusion. Every defense accounted for known threats. This was neither. This was something that did not break systems. It replaced them. The transmission returned. "We told you to leave." No change in tone. No escalation. Just repetition, as if the outcome had already been decided long ago. "Open a direct channel," the commander ordered. There was a pause. "It's already open," the communications officer said quietly. Of course it was. The commander straightened, forcing clarity into his voice. "Identify yourselves." Silence followed. Not interference. Not delay. Just silence, controlled and intentional. "We are withdrawing," he continued, choosing his words carefully. "Cease whatever action you are taking." For a moment, nothing happened. Then navigation systems flickered again. "Commander," the navigation officer whispered. "We can't plot an exit. Every path returns us here." A realization settled heavily across the command deck. They were not being held in place by force. They were being allowed nowhere else to go. Across the fleet, systems began shutting down. Not violently, not destructively. One by one, ships lost functionality in clean, controlled sequences. Weapons powered down. Targeting systems went dark. Propulsion reduced to idle states that could not be overridden. Entire vessels fell silent. No explosions. No visible damage. Just absence. "They're disabling us," someone said, the words barely audible. The commander watched as another section of the fleet went dark, their signals fading into nothing. Not destroyed. Simply removed from relevance. "How many ships still operational?" he asked. The answer came slower than it should have. "Decreasing." Numbers followed, each one lower than the last. The fleet, once an overwhelming force, was being reduced without resistance, without effort, without even direct engagement. It was not a battle. It was a process. The small vessel remained where it had appeared, unchanged, untouched by the collapse surrounding it. The commander's gaze fixed on it, understanding settling fully now. They had never been in control of this encounter. Not for a single moment. The warning had not been a threat. It had been mercy. And they had mistaken it for ignorance. What remained of the fleet no longer resembled an invasion force. It was a collection of silent hulls suspended in a space they could neither control nor escape. Systems that still functioned did so under invisible restraint, responding only within limits they did not define. Weapons were inert. Navigation returned meaningless confirmations. Communication carried no certainty. The structure of command still existed in name, but not in power. The commander stood within that hollow authority, aware now that every decision he made would only matter if it was allowed to matter. He did not issue another order. "Open a channel," he said instead, his voice stripped of its earlier certainty. "It is already open," came the familiar response. Of course it was. He held the silence for a moment, choosing his words with care that had not been necessary before. "We request direct communication." There was no delay. "Proceed." The reply was immediate, clear, and controlled. Not loud. Not threatening. Simply present. The commander drew a slow breath. "You have demonstrated complete control over our systems. You could have destroyed this fleet at any point. Why have you not?" A brief pause followed. Not hesitation, consideration. "Because you can still leave." The answer landed with more weight than any weapon. Around him, the remaining crew listened in absolute stillness. No one spoke. No one moved. The truth of that response settled deeper than the loss of control ever had. "You warned us," the commander said quietly. "Yes. We did not understand. That is not our responsibility." There was no arrogance in the reply. No satisfaction. Only a statement of fact. The commander lowered his gaze for a fraction of a second, then raised it again. "What are your terms?" "You leave this system," the voice said. "You do not return." "And if we refuse?" Silence answered first, stretching just long enough to remove any illusion of ambiguity. "Then you will remain." The meaning was clear. Not destroyed. Not attacked. Contained. Forever. The commander absorbed it fully, the last remnants of resistance fading into something colder and more precise. This was not a negotiation. It never had been. The outcome had been decided the moment they ignored the warning. What remained now was permission. "Restore limited control," he said. "Allow us to withdraw." Another pause. Then, across the fleet, systems shifted. It was subtle at first. A navigation console accepted a new coordinate and held it without distortion. Propulsion systems responded to input without deviation. Communication channels stabilized, no longer fragmenting or redirecting. "Commander," the navigation officer said, disbelief threading through his voice. "We have a path." The commander did not look away from the forward display. "Take it." Engines engaged across the surviving vessels, slow at first, as if testing boundaries that no longer resisted. Movement followed, real and consistent. For the first time since entering the system, distance changed with intention. They were being released. Not all at once. Not freely. Guided. A single corridor through space opened within their systems, precise and narrow. Every attempt to deviate from it failed immediately, gently corrected back into alignment. There was no force applied, no resistance felt. Just an absence of alternatives. "They're giving us one way out," an officer whispered. The commander nodded once. "Then we take it." The fleet moved, diminished and silent, carrying with it the weight of what had occurred. No one celebrated survival. No one spoke of retaliation. The idea itself had become irrelevant. As the distance from Earth increased, systems continued to function normally, but no one mistook that for regained control. The boundary had simply shifted. "Transmission incoming," the communications officer said. The commander did not hesitate. "Play it." "This was your warning," the voice said. "There will not be another." No emphasis. No threat. just certainty. The channel closed. No further contact followed. The fleet continued its retreat, leaving behind a world that had never needed to prove its strength in ways they could understand. The commander remained at his station, watching the shrinking image of Earth, no longer seeing it as fragile or unprepared. They had not faced a primitive species. They had encountered something far more dangerous. A civilization that did not display power, did not rely on it, but possessed it so completely that it never needed to be shown until it was already too late. The commander finally spoke, his voice quieter than it had ever been. They were never ignorant. No one disagreed. Because the truth was no longer something that required confirmation. It had been written into every system they had lost, every command they had failed to execute, every path they had been forced to follow. Humans had not defended their world with force. They had simply decided the outcome. And by the time the fleet understood that, the war had already been over.